Hey everybody, welcome to the online edition of The Gathering. My name is Nick and we are glad that you are here with us for a few moments today. It's just been a beautiful week here in the Pacific Northwest. We're getting a little rain here as we come into the weekend, but just amazing period of time and just glad to live in a place where we get to experience that kind of beauty. And hopefully you've been out in it a little bit, enjoying the weather and just this phase of life. So glad that you're taking a little time out of that to spend some time with us here. We are a group that is sort of a collaboration between two churches who are still separate churches on paper. Zion Lutheran Church, which is an ELCA Lutheran church, and Pathways Church, which is a non-denominational independent church. And these two churches have been working together for about 2 years now, and although we do have some significant stylistic differences, we have some different traditions, ways we've gone about doing things, there is a sense of the things that mattered most to us, our core values, that really drew us together. And so now in this partnership, we've been learning one another's traditions, sharing in one another's traditions, learning to love and appreciate those traditions. And in a world that's pretty polarized, in a world where people who have their own way of doing things go off in their own separate directions, this has been a really fun experience where we have actually been coming together despite our differences. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about who we are as a community, you can go to our website at everettgathering.com and you can read up a little bit more about our core values there, which are the things that brought us together as a group. But if you don't go there, or if you have been there and you want a little bit more background about who we are, we usually introduce ourselves with 2 words to give you just a little flavor or a taste of who we are as a community. Now, the first word that we use to describe ourselves is the word cautious. And by cautious, we mean that many of us are a little cautious, sometimes even skeptical about organized religion. Now, many of us, of course, have grown up in religious environments or surrounded by religion, and we've definitely seen religion used in some ways that's helpful, beneficial, positive, even inspiring. But many of us have also seen religion, even religion with Jesus' name on it, used in ways that's much less inspiring. In fact, some of us personally, or those we know and love and care about, have been harmed significantly by religion, even Christianity. And so we've seen religion used in some ways as toxic, harmful, exclusionary. And so many of us find ourselves a little cautious about organized religion. Now, I know what you're saying. That's kind of weird because you're a church, so by definition, you are an organized group of religious people. And that is true, but we think there's something healthy about being a little cautious about organized religion if we are in fact going to identify and organize ourselves as so. Now, the other word we use to describe ourselves is the word curious, and by that we really just tried to get off the idea that we don't have all the answers to everything. I don't, our group doesn't, we don't claim to have the market cornered when it comes to truth and reality. So we see things a certain way, but we're always in search of learning more, which means we want to practice what it means to be unusually curious about one another. Because frankly, there might be some things that I have to share that you need to know, but there's probably some things that you have to share that I need to know. And so we try to model what it means to be curious all the time, asking questions, learning, because all of us have blind spots and we need the help of others to learn about things that perhaps we didn't already know. And so that means we're constantly reassessing and thinking through things that maybe we thought were already certain and settled, but that we might need to take another look at. So if either of those 2 words seems to kind of resonate with you, I would suggest that this is a good group for you to continue to check out. Now, what we're going to be doing over the next couple moments is sort of a miniaturized version of our in-person gatherings. In our in-person gatherings, we kind of blend some formal liturgical elements with a lot of informal elements, and we do more singing and that type of thing. But here in the online space, we kind of do just a shortened version of that. So we'll be singing one song here. Our worship leader, Billy, is going to come on the screen and lead in a song, and you're welcome to worship along with that if you would like to. And then after he gets done with that, there's going to be a little reflective video. Today, that video is a reading from Psalm 146. We're going through some of the lectionary texts, which are an assigned group of readings for each Sunday. And Psalm 146 is one of those readings for today. So we'll see that read out. And then afterwards, I'm going to come back on the screen, and we're going to deal with another one of the lectionary texts today, which is a very odd parable of Jesus. And so we're going to look at that and ask it a bunch of questions and kind of enter into the world that Jesus sets up for us with that story. So after that, we're going to wrap the whole thing up with communion. So at the end, I'll kind of lead us into a time of communion. And in our in-person gatherings, we celebrate that together each week, and we provide everything that you need for that experience. We provide the bread and the cup. But here in the online space, you'll need to procure a couple of those elements for yourself. So you'll need something for the bread, which could be a little piece of bread, or it could be a little cracker. And you'll need something for the cup, which could be maybe a little bit of juice, or maybe some wine left over from last night's dinner. But if at any point you want to get a couple of those things on hand, you'll be all set and have everything you need to participate in communion if you would like to do that. And then, of course, we'll wrap the whole thing up with some announcements and send you on your way. All right. Why don't we get right to it? Billy's going to come on the screen and lead us in the song, and then afterwards, after the psalm reading, I'll see you back on the screen in just a few moments.
If my heart is so overwhelmed and I cannot hear your voice, I'll hold on to what is true, though I cannot see. If the storms of life they come and the road ahead gets steep, I will lift these hands in faith, I will believe. I'll remind myself of all that you've done and the life I have because of your Son. 'Cause love came down and rescued me, love came down and set me free, and I am yours, I am forever yours. Mountain high and valley low, I'll sing out, remind my soul that I am yours, I am forever yours. When my heart is filled with hope and every promise comes my way, when I feel your hands of grace rest upon me, staying desperate for you, God, staying humble at your feet, I will lift these hands in praise, I will believe. I'll remind myself of all that you've done and the life I have because of your Son. 'Cause love came down and rescued me, love came down and set me free, and I am yours, I am forever yours. Mountain high and valley low, I'll sing out, remind my soul that I am yours, I am forever yours. 'Cause I am yours, I am yours, all my days, Jesus, I am yours. 'Cause I am yours, I am yours, all my days, Jesus, I am yours. 'Cause love came down and rescued me, love came down and set me free, I am yours, I am forever yours. Mountain high, valley low, I'll sing out, remind my soul that I am yours, I am forever yours.
All right, there's some great readings here in the lectionary. Over the last couple weeks, we wrapped up a series on Esther pretty recently, a couple weeks ago, and while we're in between series, we are dealing with some of the lectionary texts, which are assigned readings each week for church gatherings. And many churches all across the world will follow something like the Revised Common Lectionary, and so any of those churches that you walk into will be reading with, and commenting on, and worshiping with those particular texts. And so we've been taking a couple weeks in between series, taking a little breather here before we tackle something else that's big and fun by just falling into the kind of normal rhythm of much of the church globally in dealing with some of these lectionary texts and using them as a part of our worship. Now, I was thinking back, it's fall now, which is kind of weird, and this summer, my son and I, we spent a lot of time watching movies. Peyton was out, my daughter was out around doing a bunch of stuff, working and all sorts of stuff, but my son was home, and so we just started watching a lot of movies together, and so we went to the theater, actually, which we haven't done much of in the last couple years. We went to the theater, and we saw F1 movie, which was fantastic. We saw Superman, which was good, and Fantastic Four, which was really good, and just had some fun time in the theaters. But my son doesn't just like new movies. He actually thinks it's kind of fun watching old movies. And so we started watching a bunch of movies like from my childhood, and so we're going back watching stuff from the 80s, which he thinks is kind of fun. And somehow along the way, we kind of stumbled onto some of Eddie Murphy's movies. And so we spent some time watching some of Eddie Murphy's old movies from the 80s. Now, some of them aren't totally child appropriate, but we were watching a lot of TV edit versions of them, so it seemed all right. But we watched some of the best. The Beverly Hills trilogy is just fantastic. We watched Coming to America and the new version, the sequel that they did here recently. And Eddie Murphy actually has a new movie called The Pickup that's out. And this isn't really a plug for Eddie Murphy movies, but that one wasn't half bad either. We kind of had fun watching that. But one of the last movies that we watched was an Eddie Murphy movie called Trading Places. And if you're old enough, you'll remember this one. It was from 1983. And it's one of the more famous Eddie Murphy movies. It also includes actor Dan Aykroyd. And in this movie, the basic premise is that there is a wealthy stock trader played by Dan Aykroyd, and the other main character is a homeless fellow played by Eddie Murphy. And what happens in this movie is they actually trade places in life. There's this big role reversal that happens over a bet between two of the guys who run the stock company. Now, the one guy who had everything loses it all, while the guy who had nothing gets everything that the wealthy guy once had. And it's this interesting reversal that happens, and the story is funny, right? It's a comedy, but it also has an interesting commentary on what is it that creates wealth and poverty, and why is there such a huge chasm or divide that exists between the two? And it's a funny movie, but it also makes you think, how am I in the position I'm in today? Just because I'm so great, or because I'm so lousy and terrible, or are there some other factors at play? It's a smart movie. It's funny, but it also causes you to think. Now, our lectionary text today tells a similar story to the Eddie Murphy movie, Trading Places. It's a parable that Jesus tells of a similar type of role reversal. It's often called the rich man and Lazarus, and it's found in Luke chapter 16, 19 through 31. And so what I want us to do is just to read this story, okay? Just kind of hear it the way that Luke records it here. And then after we kind of familiarize ourselves with the story, let's begin to interact with it and see if we might be able to pull out of it any meaning that it might have for us today. So let's read the story first of all. We'll go to Luke 16, starting in verse 19. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. Now the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. And the rich man also died, and he was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus here to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony with these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment." And Abraham replied, "Well, they have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." And he said to them, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, then neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." Now, this is an interesting story. It's a parable of Jesus, and Jesus tells it in order to make people think. And so today, I'd like to help us think our way through this story a little bit today by asking some questions of the story. Now, one of the things we talk about often in our time together is making sure to ask a lot of questions of the Bible text that we're reading. I mean, we talked about curiosity being kind of a primary distinctive of this particular group, and we do want to be a group that asks a lot of questions. And I find that we often are able to interact with the Bible text material in a way that allows the Spirit to begin to work and form things in us by spending some time asking some questions. And so today, I'd like to help us ask some questions of the text. And the first is this: who the heck is Lazarus? Now, this is kind of an interesting parable because one of the characters in this parable, in this story of Jesus, is named. We get a personal name of one of the characters in this parable. His name is Lazarus. Now, this is, you should know, highly unusual. Jesus does not normally give names, personal names, to characters that he has in his parables. I mean, you just think of like the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? We don't have his name. We don't know if it's Tom or Jim or whatever, right? We're just told he's the parable of the Good Samaritan. We don't have a proper name. But in this story, we do get one. Now, we don't know the name of the rich person. Jesus doesn't give us that name. But he does give us the name of the poor man, Lazarus. Now, that's a common name in the ancient world, so perhaps we shouldn't make anything of it. But also, it's a name that you've probably heard before, right? I mean, Lazarus may have been common in Jesus' day. It's not common today, and so you kind of recognize it when you hear it. And you might recognize it as the name of one of Jesus' close personal friends, a guy who actually died in the Gospel of John, in John's telling of the story of Jesus, and whom Jesus then brought back to life. And so some have suggested, well, maybe this story then ties to John 11, where Jesus is telling a story about his friend, and maybe this Lazarus is his friend. Well, the name is similar, but there's some problems with that. For instance, we don't think Lazarus, as Jesus' friend, was poor. In fact, it actually seems that he comes from a family with some means. And Lazarus isn't mentioned in any of the Gospels except for John, and it would be weird that Luke never mentions his miraculous back from the dead event, but does mention his name in this strange parable. So it seems unlikely to most scholars that the name Lazarus here is meant to reference Jesus' friend in John 11. But there is another specific reason that this man might have been given this particular name. Now, the name Lazarus is actually an abbreviated form of another name, and that name is Eleazar, Lazarus from Eleazar. And formally, Eleazar is just El-Azar, El meaning God, Azar meaning he helps, right? So his name really just means God helps. And it could be that Jesus here is telling a story where this poor person is named God helps to highlight God's care for the poor. God cares, God helps, even when no one else does. And so this name being given here might juxtapose the fact that the poor man gets a given name and the rich man doesn't, but also to highlight and draw attention to the fact that the rich man does not help this poor man, Lazarus. He is a man that only God cares enough to help. So the name could be given here simply for the purpose of comparison. Now, another major question as we read the story is often, is this story about the afterlife? Okay, I mean, it would be hard to not ask that question when you read this story, right? I mean, much of the setting of this parable is in the afterlife. But is it meant to be a teaching about that? Now, much of this story takes place in this fictional story takes place in a setting called Hades, which is the place of the dead in the Greek way of thinking. All right, and some have thought of this story as something given to help teach us about what the afterlife is all about. And I've heard whole sermons used using this particular parable as proof text for views about what hell is like after we die. But I think that this way of understanding the parable misses the point of the story for several reasons. Now, the first is this. Parables in general, you should know, have basically one major point. Now, long ago, it was popular to kind of allegorize every part of a parable. Well, this represents that, and this represents this. Origen, an early church leader, was famous for this. But most scholars today are agreed that the point of a parable is to communicate one general idea, and the rest of the details, however interesting, are for the most part just kind of background filler to make the story interesting. And that those details should probably not be pressed too far. And so most then assume that the main point of this parable is not anything to do with what the afterlife is all about, but is really to talk to us about the treatment of the poor treatment of the rich regarding the poor. And I find that very convincing to me, the main point of this parable, in part because you should know that this story about these two guys ending up in a hell-like situation is not very unique in Jesus' day. There are other stories floating around at this time, and Jesus appears to sort of be riffing off of them in this particular parable. Now, there were plenty of Greek stories. There were one by Plato and one by Plutarch, and even some Egyptian stories that were very similar to what Jesus is describing here in this parable. In fact, people visiting the place of the dead and seeing those who were not rewarded in life like they should be being rewarded in the afterlife was very common. In fact, both ways, being rewarded and not being rewarded. In fact, one Egyptian story even describes a rich man being tortured with a hinge pin from the gate of Hades being jammed into his eye, while a poor man is there beside him wearing the rich man's clothes. I mean, it is a strikingly similar story of the rich man being tortured while the poor man is being elevated. And so it's likely that Jesus knows about these stories floating in culture and is sort of using one, riffing on one as a vehicle to talk about something else. Not making up a story to talk about what happens after you die, but really to use this story to make a better point or a different point. Which sort of leads us to the whole idea and the whole purpose of parables in the first place. Parables are stories used to help people see things in a new way. In fact, the word parable means to lay alongside of. It's the idea of comparison or contrast. You're using one thing to describe another. Now, in Jesus' day, people were already starting to get the idea of an afterlife that had rewards and punishments. This wasn't a Jewish idea from the beginning, but it evolved over time. And by Jesus' day, there was an idea of an afterlife of rewards and punishment. And if Jesus was just trying to further illustrate this, he'd only be strengthening that idea, not giving a new way of seeing something. That would be more direct communication than indirect communication. And parables are really more of what we'd call indirect communication. Now, I should have put this on the screen, but there's a great quote from Kyle Snodgrass about what parables are all about. And he says that parables are a form of communication intended to make people think in a new way. They are a form of indirect communication. Now, direct communication, he says, is important for conveying information, but learning is more than just information, especially when people think that they already understand. People set their defenses against direct communication and learn to conform its message to the channels of their understanding of reality. So indirect communication finds a way in a back window and confronts what one thinks is reality. Isn't that interesting? Parables, as indirect communication, are trying to find a way into your mind through a back window to make you rethink something that you would otherwise put up defenses against. And so this parable isn't likely trying to reaffirm a view of afterlife that you already have, so much as trying to help living people see something new about their current life. And I would contend that Jesus tells a story about the afterlife in order to help us see something that is true about the current life. And if that is true, then what does this story tell us about this life? Well, I think the point becomes the reversal itself. I think Jesus' parable wants us to see that what we think is true about the afterlife is really true about this life. Now, let me explain here. What the rich man learns in this afterlife scenario, in death, is what it feels like to be in need in this life, right? I mean, all of a sudden he experiences it. Now, in the afterlife, he needs help. He's the one in trouble. He looks over and he sees Lazarus there, and Lazarus is now living the good life, while he himself is suffering. And there is a chasm between them. He can't cross it. He begs for help. He says, "Can't you just come over and cool my tongue?" The very thing that he feasted with in life. But no one is there to help him. He's in hell, and no one cares. Now, what if this story isn't trying to tell us about the details of afterlife, but is using that picture to tell us something about our current life? And Jesus is laying down this story and this scene alongside of our real life and wanting us to see the similarities. You see, because in life, it was Lazarus in need. He was living in a form of hell. Sores all over his body, starving, no one to feed him, no one to give him something for his tongue, while the rich man was living the good life. And Lazarus was just begging for help, but the rich man didn't help. Lazarus wanted a better life, but there was a chasm of many things, social standing and economic systems that were just too large to overcome. He was in hell, and no one cared. You see, here the point isn't to tell us what the afterlife is like. The point is to use an afterlife story to tell us what this life is like for so many. You get it? It's important because in religion, we have often become so preoccupied with trying to avoid hell after death that we miss the very real hells that people live in today. And I think that is the reality that Jesus wants to see. I mean, maybe the rich man had noticed Lazarus before. He seems to know his name. But now Jesus wants him to really see what life is like from Lazarus's perspective. And so Jesus tells a story about an afterlife to help us see the truth about what is true today. Now, does it work? Well, within the story of this parable, we have to ask, did it work for this rich man? Well, I don't know. I mean, this rich man here, he's getting a taste of what hell is like, right? And he didn't get it in his real life, but he's getting a taste of it in his afterlife. And you'd think that that would have some sort of effect on someone, right? But it appears by the end of the story that the rich man still doesn't get it. Because at the end of this whole thing, his concern is not for what Lazarus has experienced in the life before. At the end, he's still really only concerned for those like him who are still alive. I mean, you'd think what would happen is once you experience this in the afterlife, you'd say, oh my gosh, I get it now. I mean, I had no idea it was this bad. I saw Lazarus there, but I didn't know what it's like to feel like this. I mean, Abraham, you've got to go rescue those other people like Lazarus who are out there experiencing what I'm experiencing today. But that is not what the rich man says. Instead, his concern is simply for his siblings, his brothers, other people who are like him. Probably also privileged from the same family. And his concern at the end is still not for Lazarus, but his concern is now wanting them to be spared from an afterlife of hell rather than caring for those experiencing a current life of hell. You see, at the end, the way I read this story, the rich man still doesn't get it. It's still all about him and people like him. And I think that's why Abraham in the story says, even if a person came back from the dead, they wouldn't get it. Now, it could be that that's a reference to Jesus coming back from the dead, and I'm sure the early church read it that way, but it also might be a reference to this rich man himself. In other words, here you are. You died. You know what it's like to suffer now, but you still don't get it. And even if I sent you back, what would you have to offer? You still don't get it. So why tell this story in the first place? Why tell such a weird, strange story about a guy who doesn't get it in the end? Well, like pretty much all of Jesus' parables, I think this parable is a bit of a challenge. The story ends with a man stuck in hell, and it seems like a pretty awful ending. It seems like maybe its intent is to condemn or to shame, and I certainly know people who read it that way. But I'm not so sure, because that's not generally the point of parables. The point of a parable is to invite you to see something that you didn't see before. Not necessarily to condemn you, but to persuade you to re-examine things. And so I don't think this story is a story of condemnation. I think this story is an invitation. You see, I think Jesus tells the story because he cares for the rich man too. And whether he knows it or not, the rich man in his own way lives in a certain type of hell. He only cares about himself, and he's created a chasm between himself and other people that God cares about, other people that he probably needs too, and who need him. And he's created a chasm between himself and the good life that God wants for all of us. And in telling this story, I believe that Jesus holds out hope that people like this rich man could possibly be convinced to rethink things. And in that way, I think this story is an act of grace. It's an invitation to reconsider. It's an invitation to reconsider the work of God in our current life. In many ways, it's like the movie Trading Places. I mean, it's a funny movie, But I think it's intended to do something more than just make us laugh. I think it's intended to cause us to think. It causes you to reflect when you watch it. Am I in the position I'm in today because I deserve it? Or am I here because of unjust systems? Do I care about the guy on the street as much as I care about the guy on Wall Street? It causes you to reflect. And in my mind, that reflection, that is good news. Because when we reflect, we are opening ourselves up to the work of God in us. We are opening ourselves up to how God might want to renew our minds and inhabit our lives and change us more into his likeness. Jesus isn't telling the story to condemn a man to eternal punishment. He's telling the story to invite a person to a way of transformation that he is offering that will not only transform him, but all of the world around him. The story has a restorative intent, not to condemn, but to invite. I'm glad for those moments in my life when something happens that God uses to cause me to reflect and rethink and re-examine things. Because I've got some blind spots. There's some things I haven't considered. And sometimes I have these moments where I get challenged about what I've thought previously. And those moments are like these little windows where God helps me to reconsider. And I consider those moments to be incredible movements of the Spirit. An act of God, a grace of God, to invite me to something deeper and more beautiful that I wouldn't have seen without that moment. I believe God uses these reflections to help shape us into people that are more like Jesus. Now, did it happen to the man in the story? Or more importantly, did it happen to his brothers, his siblings that he was concerned about? Well, the parable doesn't tell us. But in large part, I think that's the point. We are to see ourselves as the siblings left behind. We are to see ourselves in their position and ask the question, what will we do? What will we care about? What will we allow God to do with us? You see, we've been asking questions of this parable, but in the end, it's almost as though the parable wants to question us. Do you want to see the world and the people in it like God does? And do you? Now, of course, God's greatest work of persuasion was another story of death, the death of Christ himself. It is the ultimate story of invitation, isn't it? Where God himself goes down to death and defeats death through resurrection. And in that act invites us to see love as the most powerful force in existence. It is a story that invites us to see love as something that not even death can conquer. It is an invitation for us to join Jesus in this path and allow him to breathe this life and love into us in such a way that it can never be defeated, that our lives will always be changed, and thus the world around us. And so we go to communion today with that in mind, a reminder of God's sacrifice for us and of its invitation to invite us to participate in a new way of life. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you so much today that you mess with us. I like that you mess with us, God. I like that you won't leave us where we are, that you will seek to persuade us towards your way of love through any means necessary. Often we put up our defenses towards what it is that you want to change in us. And thank you that you operate through indirect methods in order to find a window into our soul with your Spirit. That even through this story today, that you may begin a work in us because of this beautiful, beautiful story that causes us to re-examine and think. Obviously, we most importantly, we see your cross as that biggest invitation, a new way, an invitation to see the world in a new way, and to see love as the center of all power in this universe centered in you. We love you, Jesus. We're thankful for what you have done for us and what you've invited us to. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. All right, let's go to the communion table. You can take, if you've got those communion elements on hand, you can bust them out, and a little piece will play here, and you can pause it, or if you want to just let it play, you can do that, and spend some time reflecting on the love demonstrated through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And then we'll wrap the whole thing up with announcements in just a bit. Let's go to communion. All right, let's wrap everything up with a couple announcements here today, some things that are happening throughout the next couple weeks. First of all, we do meet in person on Sundays at 10 a.m. We meet at the Zion Lutheran Church property, which is just south of downtown Everett. It's very easy to get on and off the freeway at the 41st Street exit. We're kind of right off the exit there. We'd love to have you join us anytime in person. The real treasure of this group is the people, and if you can make it in person, you're always welcome among us. You can stay up to date with things that are happening by following us on the socials. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. You can find us at The Gathering Everett, and that is a great way to stay up to date with information. Another way to stay up to date with information if you're not on the socials is just to join our email newsletter. We send that out pretty regularly, and if you're not already on the distribution list, please message us. You can message us on Facebook with your name and email address, or drop me a line. My email's on the screen there, and I'd be happy to add you to the list as well. Student ministry is meeting tonight. If you're in high school or junior high, they meet at 6 p.m. downstairs at the Zion Lutheran Church property. They do games and snacks and some small group discussion stuff, and you are welcome down there if you are in junior high or high school. Coming up October 5th, it's a Sunday, we are going to be participating in a pet blessing, which is something our group's never done before, but some of our friends in the Lutheran fellowships here in the Everett area have been doing this for a long time. It's a historical part of what they do, and so we're joining in that tradition this year. They're going to meet at Clark Park in downtown Everett at 12:30 p.m. You're welcome to bring along any pet that you have that doesn't, I've been told that doesn't run away or fly away or swim away or whatever away, or attack other participants that are going to be there. So if you've got a pet that just doesn't go out in public well, you can always bring a picture of your pet on your phone or one printed out or something. And it'll just be a short gathering in the park where there's going to be a special prayer of blessing over the pets. And of course, pets for many of us are part of our families, and we want to pray for good health for them. And so that'll be happening on that date if you'd like to participate in it. The Pacifica Chamber Orchestra does meet quarterly and put on their concerts exclusively at the Zion Lutheran Church building. And their next fall concert is Saturday, October 4th. It's beautiful music. It starts at 3 p.m. p.m. Tickets are $25 for adults and $20 for students and seniors. And you can pay just cash or check at the door. You don't have to buy tickets in advance. But it's beautiful music. If you would like to attend that, I'd encourage you to check that out. Then finally, if you'd like to give or donate, you can do that online. There's a little QR code on the screen if you're able to take a shot of that. If not, you can go to our website at everettgathering.com/donate, and you can set up a one-time gift or a recurring gift. And we want to say thank you to those of you who are supporting us financially. We really appreciate that. Okay, that's pretty much it for today. We'll continue on our lectionary stuff again next week. It's kind of fun bouncing around to some of these texts that we don't necessarily find all the time in our sermon series, and so we'll be taking a look at a couple more of those before we start a new series here coming up very soon. So anyway, I know it's going to be a little rainy this week. So for those of you Pacific Northwesterners, some of you are like, you mossbacks, you're ready for the rain. The rest of you are like, oh man, summer's over. But hang in there. Hopefully it's a good week. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Talk to you later. Bye.